It seems so many developers want to live the American dream, but I always found this so strange. I'm a front-end developer living in Norway, you know, this country. And I will show you why Norwegian developers have it significantly better than American developers. The difference is immense, and it turns out America is a terrible place to work. Quick disclaimer, I'm currently employed in Norway, but I'll keep my own place of work out of this and focus on the average experience of each country instead. So, with that out of the way, let's get started on the first reason. Why do we work? Is work the most important part of our life? It's pretty clear that life is work in the US with 0 paid time off mandated by law. Let me repeat that. A lot of companies have 0 paid time off in the US. That is insane! Most tech companies do offer paid time off, but the national average is still just 10 days plus 8 public holidays. On the other side, Norway mandates at least 21 days, with 25 being the default, plus 10 public holidays. We also have at least twice the paid sick leave days, and even 10 extra days per child. Sick people should stay at home and rest, not go to work and infect everyone because they can't take a day off. In Norway, we even get our paid time back if we get sick during our holiday. Another issue in the US is that there's no max overtime, where in Norway we have laws capping it at 200 hours a year. There is a high focus on work-life balance in Norway. You might think that all of this makes us lazy, but Norway's workforce is one of the most productive in the world. Working less actually makes us more productive. This alone is a perfectly good reason to move to Norway, but it gets even worse for the US. Like most people will have children in their life. It's a beautiful yet stressful time where you will probably want to spend some time with your child after birth. You know, to recover and bond. In the US, you will only get 12 weeks unpaid. Some tech companies offer a bit more unpaid, but not even close to Norway. We get more than a year in total paid, as well as up to 12 weeks before birth if needed, as well as paid time off for checkups and at least 1 hour paid for breastfeeding each single day. We even get at least $100 per child per month from our government and cheap kindergarten. Why do people even want to have children in the US? Just look at this chart, which is the change in happiness from after having children. US parents are 12% less happy. One of the reasons for this is the actual cost of giving birth. Let's talk healthcare. Do you know what the most significant difference is between our two countries? In Norway, everything you need is cheap and everything you want is expensive. It's the opposite in the US, with everything you need being expensive and everything you want being cheap. Healthcare is crazy expensive and bad in the US. Most Americans spend over $450 per month, and that's before deductibles. It's usually partially covered by your employer, but that just means you will lose your coverage if you get fired. That is just cruel. You even have to find a specific doctor covered by your insurance, and your expensive pre-existing condition will not be covered. There is also a yearly max limit where you have to pay everything after a certain sum. It is a capitalistic free market where you're supposed to shop for the best price while you're bleeding out on the street. For example, giving birth can cost $12,000 and up. But what about in Norway? Well, it's basically free. Our taxes cover healthcare and you just pay a one-time small fee of around $20 each time you visit your doctor or the hospital. It's also one of the best healthcare systems in the world, while the US has one of the worst among developed nations. That being said, dental and glasses are still not covered in Norway, so we still have some room for improvement. The US is also one of the few countries where genital mutilation is still super popular. You know, circumcision. Sounds fine until you learn it's related to the death of at least 100 babies a year and was started to prevent masturbation by this guy, the founder of Kellogg's. He also pushed for female genital mutilation with acid, but that luckily never caught on. Okay, not to beat a dead horse here, but the US handling of the global pandemic was awful. Norway has less than 1,000 dead people, the US has over 500,000. Their bad healthcare system really screwed people over on this one. They also slashed any unemployment benefits at the same time, while Norway generously increased them. Like, it was bad in Norway, but it was way better. There is one thing the US is the greatest in. It has the largest prison population in the world. Like more than 2.5 million people behind bars, compared to Norway's 3,500. Okay, that was a bit of an unfair comparison, given that the American population is 328 million people and Norway is just 5.3 million. But the US prison population is still 10 times higher if you average for population compared to Norway. The US also has crazy long sentences where you can get life in prison for just stealing a slice of pizza. And they even have the death penalty. What about in Norway? Well, we have a maximum prison sentence of only 30 years and the average is just 8 months. This might seem insane, but it has given us one of the lowest recidivism rates in the world. You know how many people recommit a crime. And harsher sentences does not lead to less crime. It just gives you fuller prisons. No one checks the law before committing a crime. People usually become criminals due to their circumstances, like a bad childhood or poverty. Norway tries to help criminals return to everyday life, but Americans just label them for life, like with the National Sex Offender Register. Most developers don't really become criminals, but you still need to be aware of the murder rates. There are more than 13,000 times more murders in the US compared to Norway. And it's still 8 times more if you average for the population, but that's still insane. The USA also has something called open carry. You can carry a loaded assault rifle around in public in the country with more than 100 mass shootings a year. It is also a country with rampant police violence and racism. That is really different in Norway, where even the police can carry weapons by default. It is more than 3 years on average between the police shooting and killing someone here. It is one of the safest countries in the world. Enough about the violence. Let's talk about education instead. This one might only apply to your children, but education is practically free in Norway with tuition fees around $100 a semester. We also have a generous student loan system with low rates provided by the government where 40% is forgiven upon graduation. Compare that to the US where student loan debt will soon pass 8% of GDP or $1.6 billion. Tuition fees and the cost of rent for students in the US are at crippling levels and still rising. They even have for-profit schools that aim to make money rather than well-educated students. Education in the US is unsustainable, but you might lose your job due to no fault of your own. The economy might crash, your employer might go bankrupt, or you might just have bad luck. Losing your job should not be the end of the world. That's why Norway has a robust social security net with generous unemployment benefits and worker unions that got your back. Your focus is on getting a new job without any additional worry. That is drastically different in the US. Unemployment benefits are significantly lower or non-existent. Worker unions are almost extinct and your health insurance is tied to your employer. This adds significantly to your stress and risk. You might even get homeless at some point, which is almost unheard of in Norway. To put it bluntly, in the US you are a disposable resource that happens to be in high demand. It's really common for something called at-will employment, which means that you can be fired at any time for any reason. That is compared to Norway, where you have on average 3 months notice, and you can't be fired without a good reason. Why do people even want to work in the US? Well, there is one reason. It is the salary. You often hear of developers having a great 6-figure income and living the dream. It is true that most salaries are a lot higher in the US, especially in Silicon Valley and New York. Taxes are also lower. The US average tax rate is at 24% and VAT is at 10%. That is much higher in Norway, where the average tax rate is 27% and VAT at 25%. Oh, and the highest effective tax rate in Norway is over 53%. We also have a wealth tax of around 1% and we are really proud of it. This might sound insane to you, but all of these taxes goes towards covering things like healthcare that you have to pay extra for in the US. Tech hubs like Silicon Valley and New York also have an out-of-control housing market. All of this means that there's a really good chance you're left with more money after everything is paid in Norway and much less stress. You also have to remember all of the unpaid overtime you will have to do in the US. Norway has a flat salary system. The difference between low and high paying jobs is significantly smaller than in the US, and this makes us more equal to each other. Inequality is much lower in Norway, and it has become one of our core values. Your value as a human being is not tied to how much money you're making. Quick side note, one of the benefits of the Norwegian tax system is that our government calculates the taxes for us, unlike in the US, where everyone has to do it for themselves. There are so many good reasons to pick Norway over the US, it's actually kind of insane when you sit down and look at the differences. There is no chance I'll be able to cover all of them in this video. I'll go over a few more of the smaller reasons, but let me know below if you want another video. Norway is a trust-based culture. We actually have a lot of unmanned shops where you have to pay for yourself and nothing is stopping you from shoplifting. It's also a flat working culture where everyone is on a first name basis, with titles being mostly meaningless. We always find it funny when people call him Mr. Trump, as we would just call him Donald over here. We also have a stable political system where politicians actually work together. Norway is not a two-party state like the US, which means that you can find a political party that you like and agree with and not have to select the lesser evil. This means less drastic changes after elections and no rioting in the streets. Norway also wins significantly over the US on most global indexes. We are ahead by 44 places on press freedom, 18 on corruption, 16 on the Human Development Index, 24 on the Democracy Index and 81 ahead on the Freedom Index. This is a measure of political rights and civil liberties. And you would expect that the land of the free to rank highly here, but they have fallen far. We are also ahead by 40 places on the Gender Equality Index, making the US an even worse choice for women. Norway is also ahead by 4 places on the Education Index, and we're at the first place on Health Insurance Coverage Index, as it's covered by our government, with the US 5 places away from the bottom. There are so many more indexes where Norway is ahead, but I'll quickly mention a few where the US is actually in the lead. The first is the ease of doing business, where the US is 3 places ahead of Norway, the Global Competitive Index, where the US is ahead by 15 places, and the Global Obesity Index, where the US is ahead by 55 places. Please don't chew on that. That was a lot of good reasons why Norway is the better place to work for developers, but there are some challenges as well. The first one is the weather. It's cold and wet here. You really need to get used to snow and rain, and it even rains for more than 2/3 of the year in some cities. Another problem is that we have a smaller tech community. It's a small country, which means fewer local meetups and conferences. However, we can alleviate some of this by traveling outside our borders and meeting online. But we don't have a Silicon Valley yet. The robust worker protection in Norway makes it a great place to work, but it might be a bit harder for employers looking to cut costs by exploiting their workers. This makes it a bit harder to start a company in Norway. It might also be the reason why Amazon hasn't set up shop here yet. I should also address that Norway has a drinking culture. Norwegians are really shy and need alcohol to be able to socialize, especially with the opposite gender. That's why it's really popular to drink on weekends. This might not be a downside to you, but it will be more challenging if you don't drink alcohol. Most Norwegian relationships start out by drinking, having a one-night stand, and then asking them out on a date if you still like them in the morning. There's even a book about this. And the final issue is that you unfortunately need to learn Norwegian to get the best jobs here. It is horrible, but a lot of code is unfortunately still written in Norwegian here. Learning the language is not that hard, but everyone is fluent in English here. We will unfortunately just switch to English if you're not good at Norwegian, and you will lose out on vital practice. Oh, and Norway's version of NASA is a joke in comparison. But they almost started a global nuclear war by accident. So, there's that. Let's summarize. The US is a country of personal responsibility. It's your job to save for retirement, prepare for unemployment, and get health insurance. The government will not help you out in any significant way. Norway has the opposite philosophy, where the government helps you out with life's essentials and it tries to even out the odds. You can get really unlucky in life, but that should not be the end of the world. The US is the best country if you really want a top developer salary, but Norway quickly becomes the better choice if you want to have a good life as well. Quick fun fact: the US actually had many of the same benefits as Norway a few decades ago, but it all ended with this guy.
I think you all know that I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
The US became a country for rich people, with the wealthiest 50 people owning more than the bottom 50%, or 165 million Americans. I have left out so many elements here. For example, how our government owns almost 2% of all stocks in the world. Let me know if you want another video going even deeper. I want to end this by saying I feel bad for the developers working in the US with the current working conditions. If you work in the US and want to see an improvement, then I would highly suggest looking into worker unions as a start and a complete political reform as a second. Working in the US can become just as good as in Norway, but significant changes are unfortunately required, and that will take time. Thank you for watching. I really hope you liked this video. Add a like if you liked it and subscribe if you want more content like this in the future. I'm still new on this platform, so anything helps. What about you? What is your favorite country to work in? Let's meet in the comments.